Welcome to First Baptist Church in Sweetwater, Texas. We join in with our pastor, Jerry Hendricks, for this week's message.
Yeah, we were talking this week about the beginning of baseball season. I know you're surprised that I'd be talking about baseball and not making fun of it, but one of the things that they do in baseball is they have a walk-up song. So for a second there, I thought, did we do that? I can't remember. I kind of lost myself, so I got so excited. But it is so fun to be able to be here today and to share in this time that we've had together. One of the things that we talked about last week is just this idea that sometimes in our faith life, if we're not careful, when we begin to follow Jesus, we miss opportunities. And we don't want to miss those. We don't, when we read about those in text, one of the things that ought to capture us is identifying with those experiences and thinking to ourselves, we just don't want that to be us. We don't want to be that one that for whatever reason didn't take those next steps with Jesus or didn't follow in the right way or become who we needed to become. And we really do want to be the kind of people, when we decide to follow Jesus, that follow him all the way. So this morning, when we have the opportunity to witness as a part of our worship two students who have begun to hear about Jesus. Okay, now that wasn't a part of our conversation. And but we hear about two students who have been learning about Jesus and thinking about this for some time, and at some point praying and asking God about this relationship that they're going to have with him. And so then today we have the opportunity as a church to witness that through their baptism, and that becomes a part of a story, of a developing story, not just for these individuals, but for our church as well. Because through that experience, we begin to understand what community means. We understand what it means to be family, the family of God, the church. And so it's hard for us sometimes to come to these things and to worship times and have these experiences and not be aware completely of what God is doing and what's at play here as we worship together. It's a wonderful time that we have. When we think about the experience that we witnessed today about these students who decided to follow Jesus and they were baptized in our presence, and we affirmed them in the walk that they have. A little bit later when we have communion, Teek, our student pastor, will be here, and these students and others will receive communion for the very first time. And when they take the cup, we pour them some juice in a cup, and we let that cup be something that they can take home with them that becomes symbolic of this decision that they've made and the way that we've affirmed them and become their family in our worship time together. When we think about these students, we also think about the early disciples, those first ones that Jesus called out to follow him. We talked about it a little bit last week, that as Jesus began to gather this group of men that would follow him, they would have the opportunity to witness his teaching, to participate in his teaching, and for at some point be able to be sent out by him to be the church to people that they encountered. And in that experience, one of the things that we ought to recognize is that there's something very special about that. It's something that in our experience we do not want to take lightly, but rather what we want to do is not only embrace that moment, but to fully participate in that moment with Jesus. And then there's that opportunity that some of these disciples had to come a little bit closer to Jesus. In fact, if you have a text this morning, open it to Matthew chapter 17. And we want to read this and just capture in your heart and in your experience this morning these folks that followed Jesus, that got to walk close to him, many of them in similar ways that we've had the opportunity to walk with him. And then it says in chapter 17 of Matthew, I don't know if I said 16 earlier, but 17. It says, after 6 days, Jesus took with him Peter, James, and John, the brother of James, and he led them up to a high mountain by themselves. What we have is a picture of men who followed Jesus. Sometimes they followed him closely and there wasn't a larger crowd around them. Often there was. But on this occasion, Jesus has singled out these to come with him a little further. This morning, what I want you to think about in your faith life and in your journey with Christ is, what is the little further that's at play in your life? As you walk with Jesus and you get to know him and his purposes for you, what is the next part of that journey beginning to look like for you? Jesus wants to draw us near to him. Every one of us. And as he calls us and we have that opportunity to walk with him, he begins to show us some things. And when he shows us things, we want to make sure that we're attentive, that we don't miss the point. In verse 2 he says, "There he was transfigured before them. His face shone like the sun, and his clothes became as white as the light. Just then there appeared before them Moses and Elijah talking with Jesus." Now, if you are the disciples of Christ, and you've walked with him with others, and now he's invited you to become a part of a smaller group, you see now something you've never seen before. You are now where you've never been before. As you walk with Jesus, those two things are going to become a reality in your life. God is going to show you things you've not seen before. And you're going to be closer to God than you've ever been before. So as we draw near, what we want to say this morning is, don't miss what God has for you. Because I think the disciples' story was they might have missed it a bit. It says in verse 4, Peter said to Jesus, "Lord, it is good for us to be here. If you wish, I'll put up 3 shelters, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." In this case, he becomes the excited builder, doesn't he? He gets caught up in the emotion of the experience. He's closer to Jesus than he's ever been. He's witnessed something that he's never witnessed before, and the others haven't either. And so in this experience, he gets caught up in this, and he says, let's build something. For us, it may not be building something. I mean, my confession is, for me, it would be, let's do something. We got to do something with this. This is something that's special, and we can't just let this moment rest. There's got to be something more that we create through this, right? However it is that you walk with God, you need to discover the what's next in your experience with him. And what we find in Peter's experience is this. In verse 5, while he was still speaking, a bright cloud covered them, and a voice from the cloud said, "This is my son whom I love. With him I'm well pleased. Listen to him." Could this get any better for these guys? Have you ever had those experiences where you knew God was in your presence? I don't know that I've had many of those in my life. But when you have those moments and God seems nearer than he's ever been to you, it does something to you where sometimes you want to do something, or you know that you don't want this moment to end. In verse 6 it says, when the disciples heard this, they fell face down to the ground, terrified. It's a terrifying experience. And Jesus, he came up and he touched them. "Get up," he said. "Don't be afraid." When they looked up, they saw no one except Jesus. Wow, don't you want that to be your story? Don't you want that to be a part of your faith experience, that you've decided to walk with Jesus and maybe closer with him than you've ever walked before? And as God begins to draw near to you and you decide to draw near to him, don't you want God in his way in your life to touch you? Say, don't worry. There's going to be more in this journey. As they were coming down the mountain, Jesus instructed them, "Don't tell anyone what you've seen until the Son of Man has been raised from the dead." And the disciples said, "Well, why then do your teachers of the law say that Elijah must come first?" And Jesus replied, "To be sure, Elijah comes and he'll restore all things, but I tell you, Elijah has already come, and they didn't recognize him." In other words, what Jesus is saying is, I'm in their presence. I'm the Elijah the scripture referred to, and I'm in your presence, and I'm not being recognized. In the same way, the Son of Man is going to suffer at their hands. Then it began to make sense to the disciples. They understood. Then the disciples understood that he was talking to them about John the Baptist, who had come and spoke of Jesus coming. This morning, I just want to invite you to draw near. Over this next week, we're in this season of preparing ourselves for Resurrection Sunday, a time where we celebrate the life that Jesus brought us, the light that he demonstrated after death. And we start in a season called the Lenten season. It begins on Ash Wednesday, which is this Wednesday, where on Wednesday night at 6 o'clock, we'll have a worship time in here. And regardless of whether or not Ash Wednesday is a part of your tradition, it's a time for you to draw near, to anticipate what God's going to do in your life, to prepare your own life and your own heart for the things that you want God to do. During the Lenten season, after Ash Wednesday, there'll be people who decide that they need to give up something in their life to kind of heighten their sense to what God is doing and saying to them. There are many folks, and we'll explain this a little bit more on Wednesday, who decide not to give up something, but to take up something. And maybe they begin a new habit or a practice that creates that sacred space for them so that they might draw near to Jesus. This is a moment. These 40-some days prior to Resurrection Sunday are a moment for us in this season, this rhythmic season of life where we have the opportunity to draw near. And what I want you to understand this morning is it's God's invitation. In the same way that Jesus invited those disciples among the other disciples and the crowd to come with him so that they might be by themselves, this moment, from this point forward till Resurrection Sunday, is a time for you to draw near. And we do it in a variety of ways through our worship. Our choir will lead us one Sunday evening on what's called Palm Sunday. It's the Sunday prior to Resurrection Sunday. We'll have Ash Wednesday on this Wednesday. There's a lot of opportunities that we have to draw near, to accept God's invitation, and to draw near to him. This morning we have another part or portion of our worship service where we have that opportunity to draw near. And we do that through an experience that we call communion, one that Jesus demonstrated with his disciples, where he took bread. They were at a meal together, and he took bread, and he broke it, and he used it in a way to describe what was about to happen to him, that his body would be broken for them. And then he took some juice, and he poured that, and when he poured that, he said, this is my blood. This is what this is going to look like for us. My blood will be shed. Not the blood of an animal, not what you're accustomed to, but this time it's going to be my blood. And my blood is going to pay for your sins. I'll be the final blood sacrifice for your life.
Thank you for joining us at First Baptist Church. We hope you can join us again, online or in person, in Sweetwater, Texas, as we learn to live out God's calling in the world around us.